So here is a second survey for the same client, different property, one that they used to own and live in, and now they've been renting it out, and now it's rented to their daughter and friends, and they're concerned about mold in most rooms, but in particular the ground floor and the first floor. Follow the survey. You will see there's a lot of information. I try and give lots of information to my clients, particularly if they ask questions, and I record it. Do skip ahead to the end where I'll give a summary, some specific advice, but also look at the report, which will be included in a link shortly. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again at the end. Yes, damp there. Primarily in the corner. If you've got air circulation, then you're getting the warmth coming in, and it reduces the relative humidity of the wall. So it's a bit of a misconception. People think that vapor and heat move in the same way, but they're not. Vapor is moving through diffusion, so you'll get the vapor through but not the heat, and that's why you get the high relative humidity on the wall. So obviously you need to solve the source of the problem, which is vapor, not enough vapor going out, but you can think about the insulation, you can think about the airflow, and you can use anti-mold paints, which obviously help as well. Looking outside, there's some growth of plants there. It's a bit concerning. Things I'm noticing on the outside, it's been damp proofed, and that reduces the ability to buffer vapor, so it increases the risk of condensation and mold. But there's nothing majorly wrong with the outside. It's just got bricks, and the great thing about bricks is they'll absorb rainwater and let it evaporate without it coming in. So render, such as in your place, if you've got a render crack, then water will come all the way through potentially. You've got those those tie bars, and they can cause areas of heat loss, but I'm not necessarily seeing mold around there. But I mean, there's no telltale signs of excess water. The drain doesn't look great. Well, the gutter doesn't look great there. There's a long length of gutter all the way around to the side, so that increases the risk of having leaks. But you'll see drip marks. So this is great. You've got it draining away from the building it's only going a short distance. Well, ideally you have that going all the way through. Just put a 2-meter thing on.
We did get them cleaned a couple of years ago.
That's
and there
good.
was a gutter leak that was fixed.
Okay.
Outside on the back door, there was quite a lot of damage on the bricks.
By the back door here.
Yeah, on the this is front door, on the back door there, but I don't know whether you're getting.
Okay. Well, it's not going to be the root cause of. Oh yeah, so you can see. Well, there's a telltale sign of water overflowing gutter, and I'd say that's an ongoing problem. But
it's on the other windowsill as well, is it?
Yeah, that's right. It's on there. But that's not the cause of your mold.
Okay. We'll have to repoint all of this.
Repointing, yeah, but repointing makes very little difference. Okay. So those are not the cause of your mold. Okay. That's vapor. Okay. I would say, roughly speaking, the effect of something like this to internal dampness would be less than a very small t-shirt drying, and you've clearly got a lot more than a small t-shirt drying. It's obviously been damp proofed. The gutter's been cleared apparently. So just to say that if there's ever condensation in a property, even if it's on a single glazed window, here it's a double glazed window, that's a sign of excess vapor. A good and quick way of telling whether you've got excess vapor in a property is leaving a mirror outside in the cold of night, bringing it in the morning and seeing whether there's any condensation. If there is, you've got too much vapor. I'll explain why later. It was an interesting example of a mouldy bag. The reason why bags and leather and things like that go mouldy is because they're marginally hygroscopic. They draw in some of the vapor, so they can go mouldy where other things, where the relative humidity is slightly above 85%, but it still comes down to the same problem, which is excess vapor. The other thing is that once you have mould, it's hard to get rid of because you increase the spores, the mould spores, and you just need to keep on top of it. So there's a dehumidifier, that's way too small, way too. The capacity is probably about 7 or something, maybe 10, but I'll have a look at it. Capacity of this is 12, but it's way too small. You need 20. I mean, you can have it as well, but 20 litres is what you want. The other thing to know is that even though vapour is the primary cause, it's made worse by heat loss. So zones where you get poor insulation and poor airflow are going to have greater risk of mould. So cupboards.
Right.
So a very simple additional tip is to put in insulation, and really inexpensive insulation that works really well. The wood fibre that you get for underlay. Right. So B&Q and other places sell it. Yeah. A large pack costs about £20 and you just put it on the back of the wall. Or thermal lining paper.
You would just put it at the back here, or would you put it up on the outside?
So it's not going to solve the problem. You can see condensation on there. Yeah. It's not. There's condensation dribble marks. It's not going to solve the problem of the excess vapour. The problem will move elsewhere, but it will reduce the risk of mould in the cupboards. Right, okay. Yeah, it's sort of like a belts and braces approach.
Yeah, okay, all right. And just to clarify, do I put that on just the back wall, or do I put it on any outside wall?
On the external wall.
So it would, in this
any
instance,
cold
it
wall.
would be this.
I'll use the thermal imaging camera, and you'll see where the cold zones are.
All right. Yeah, that's classic, isn't it? Look.
It's even on the jacket.
Yeah.
But
and we're worried because this has all happened in, they've been in since the end of August. Yeah.
It only takes 1 day to get condensation on it. Right. I mean, mould takes a bit longer, but so.
And what would you recommend in terms of washing these now and cleaning them now they've got the mould?
I don't think it looks too bad. I can't really speak to that. What I would do is I'd try and dry it as much as possible, then use a vacuum cleaner, because then you're sucking the mould away from the material, because it's on the surface by and large. Right. Okay. If you then need to clean it, it's going beyond my scope,
yeah,
really.
I was thinking about that poor bag out there,
Well, I would dry it, put it in a dry environment for a long time, and then and try vacuuming it off, and I think you'll find most of it will come off.
And dry environment, are we talking about plastic bag?
No, just somewhere this will be dry very soon if you follow my recommendations.
Can I just have one quick question? I know you said this was too small. But if we had more than these, would that be enough, or would you just recommend just?
I think it's. So the reason why I think a 20 litre is good, it's a sweet spot, because if you go much above that, they tend to be quite noisy. Okay. And below that, they're not drawing in the vapour fast enough to cope with drying clothes. Okay. So 20 litres is I think ideal. Okay. You'll see another survey I just wrote up and put up about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they had a clear source of vapour, but they were using a 10 litre one, and it just wasn't fast enough to.
Okay, all right. And then my other question was the location of your
The dehumidifier. Okay, good question. I get it all the time. You either put it in the source of the vapor,
Which would be the bathroom.
which, well, yeah, or the kitchen. Yeah, I put it in the living room, which says coming past from that.
Yeah.
You put it either in the source or near the source of the vapor, or you put it near the problem. So, i.e., the damp room, the room with condensation or mould,
Which they've all got.
which they've all got. So then I'll put it on the source. But
Which
yeah.
is as they come out from the kitchen.
So the key thing to solving all these problems is drive down the dew point.
And you that's what your loggers are going to show us, where
Yeah.
the dew point is, and then
Yeah.
we'll be able to monitor
Yeah.
that as we go.
Let's have a
forward.
look. We'll have a look at it on your phone now. So the three things to know. One, you have to keep the dew point below the outside temperature at all times. Otherwise, you have a risk of mould and condensation.
So
And I'll show you.
what's the dew point?
The dew point is the temperature that condensation takes place at.
Right.
It's shown on the data loggers. If you get out your phone, I'll show you on the phone.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I'll describe it.
Yeah.
So it's the temperature that condensation takes place at. When it's really cold outside, the external dew point is going to be low. So all the ventilation you use is blowing humid air from the inside and replacing it from the air from the outside. So when it's cold outside, ventilation works really well.
Right.
When it's raining outside, you're getting humid air from the outside, so it's not working nearly as well. So you have to focus on the targeting the source of the vapor, which are bathroom, kitchen, cooking, drying clothes internally. I happen to see the clothes are being dried internally without a dehumidifier, so you need to have that. And then obviously respiration, which is not much you can do about that, but that's why you need some background ventilation and or dehumidifiers. I think every property should have a dehumidifier, in my opinion. It's the best way of dealing with excess vapor.
Okay.
It's much more energy efficient. It's much greener than over ventilating a property. You only need
heat loss and that kind of thing, I presume.
You get so for all the air that you're blowing out, you have to replace it with cold air from the outside, which needs heating. That it costs for a continuous flow bathroom extractor fan running at 5 litres per second, it costs about £200 a year of additional heating costs for heating that up. If you use a dehumidifier, all the energy that's used in the dehumidifier comes out as heat.
Right.
Plus you get a 50% bonus through entropy, because it's moving from the vapor phase to the liquid phase. It's a bit like an air source heat pump.
Right.
It's releasing vapor. It's reducing vapor, it's releasing heat.
Okay.
But what you need to also know is that humid air feels much colder in winter than the equivalent dry
They
air.
said it's begun to feel wet in here, they said.
If it feels wet and cold, they're gonna reach for the thermostat and put the heating on.
Right.
If you keep the internal vapor levels down by looking at the dew point, then they won't use nearly as much energy. It'll be much more energy efficient, much greener for the planet, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I'm putting this on video, and I'll put some illustrations.
Okay. All right. Can I ask, so
question, the two major differences between the properties are, I mean, they both have mould.
Right.
They're both suffering from condensation, but yours is a much bigger property per number of adult occupants.
Yeah.
It's probably about 2 or 3 times the space.
Yeah.
So the walls can just absorb a lot more vapor than they can, and you've got more gaps, and I imagine your energy costs are higher anyway, proportionately higher. So those are the primary differences, but both have ventilation challenges. Your kitchen didn't have an extractor fan.
Yeah, it does.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it does. And we do try and use it, but it's very noisy when with the TV and
You see, well, that's the
Yeah.
thing is with modern day kitchens, we all love to spend time and we like to talk to each other and hear each other when we're talking. So people don't use the extractor fan as much as. So what we do personally, what we do is we run a dehumidifier 24/7 in the background, and it is a bit of a low background sound, and if it does annoy us, we'll just turn it off for a bit and put it back on again.
Okay.
But and when we go away, we'll run it dripping into the sink. It's much cheaper than putting heating on, which is what obviously people recommend as an alternative. It's much cheaper, and you just have it dripping into the sink, set to 70% relative humidity, and then you can turn your heating so that it only kicks on at like 2 or 3. I put the heating on for 3 degrees when I'm away. So it doesn't freeze the pipes, but I'll run a dehumidifier. So it's what I'm actually doing this week.
See, I don't think they're good. They put these as well. I know they've been putting these around the house.
Yeah, they barely do anything though.
Oh, right, okay.
Unfortunately, they probably give you the impression they're doing more than they actually are.
Right, okay. Okay.
You know, so each adult will produce roughly 2 litres per person per day.
Right.
So
6 litres here.
3/4 of a litre through respiration.
Yeah.
Not much we can do about that. Kitchen is about 1/4 of a litre. Showers, each shower is about 1/2 litre, and drying clothes is about 1/2 litre per person per day.
Okay.
And if it isn't going out the window, it will find its way to the coldest wall and form a condensation and mould.
So you'll let me.
Practical consideration is if the ventilation is too noisy, people won't use it. So it's counterproductive. So having this is certainly with the tenants aren't going to put it on. You might be able to persuade your daughter and her friends, but it's also manual, and you'll find that roughly 90% of the vapour remains in the bathroom after the person's left it.
Right.
And so what a lot of people do in the UK is they'll turn the vent off, they'll leave the door open, and the vapour in the bathroom will just permeate the rest of the house and find its way to the coldest wall, which is normally the base of the wall, which is why everyone thinks it's rising damp, but it's not, it's condensation.
Okay. Right.
I'm a big believer in having a target to aim for, and that is why the dew point is so good, because you and your daughter can both see whether they're achieving the goal, and the goal is to bring the vapor levels down by targeting the use of ventilation, by using a dehumidifier, and you'll need to supply one, in my opinion. 20 litre per day capacity dehumidifier is what you need. And you know, there are lots of brands out there, but Miko's, you know, fine as a brand. And have it just running 24/7 while there's high levels of vapour. And it will take a while for the vapour to drop down, even if this place was completely vacant with the heating on and the dehumidifier around, because it's embedded, it gets into the walls and it needs to evaporate out.
Okay. Right.
But so if it were my place, and you're thinking longer term as well, is if your daughter and her friends are finding the extractor fan too noisy to use, these cupboards tend to be a risk of mould and condensation because they're unheated. This one doesn't seem too bad. You need to allow some airflow as much as possible. The other thing is salt is counterproductive, because what it does is it increases it will draw in vapor so that the relative humidity by the salt is 75%. But if there's a temperature difference between the salt and the window of more than 5 degrees centigrade, then you'll end up having the window will be 100% relative humidity, which seems to be the case here. Using these safety locks is a good way of getting a bit of background ventilation, but it comes with a price, and that is heat loss. And I would argue that it's better to run a dehumidifier, 20 litre plus dehumidifier, rather than have these and you know, all the energy in dehumidifiers comes out as heat, plus you get a 50% bonus from entropy. So it's better to run a dehumidifier. This is where a lot of the mould and condensation is. I'll try opening.
And the price we're paying for it now.
Would you say that that's a fair summary of the way it's being received within the government and among the population here?
So drying clothes internally shouldn't be done without a dehumidifier. The alternative is open the window and close the door so the vapour doesn't come through. Where it says 60%, that tells you the relative humidity where the dehumidifier is. But the relative humidity of the cupboard where the condensation is taking place is probably much higher than that. It'll be 100%, and that's because of the temperature difference. Because relative humidity is a measure of the amount of vapor that can be held in air. When you get to the dew point, you get to the temperature where condensation takes place. And the dew point will be the same between there and there, but if the temperature of this is 12 degrees centigrade, then at 60%, you'll find that the temperature in this wall where the condensation is taking place at maybe only 5 degrees centigrade, but below the dew point, and that's why the condensation is taking place. The question is, does it make a difference if a house is cold or warm as to whether you're going to get mould or condensation? And in short, no, it doesn't make any difference. What's important is the temperature of the coldest wall. And in all properties, particularly old properties, there's somewhere that won't be well insulated. And that could just be simply the cold water pipe coming in, because the cold water is going to come in at a similar temperature to the outside, and you're going to get probably a metal pipe going into the wall. But in a property like this, where you've got the outside wall, the cupboards are on the outside wall, in the corner you get a lot of heat loss from there being increased external surface area. So you always get a lot of heat loss in the corner. And if you've got a cupboard there, even though you've got slats in the cupboard, you're going to get very little airflow from it. So the air, the heat isn't really coming into the cupboard, yet the vapor is getting into the cupboard. Vapor moves through diffusion like smoke, whereas heat tends to move through air currents. So the vapor's getting in there, but the heat isn't. So the corner of that cupboard is going to get really cold. And since relative humidity is a measure of not just the amount of vapor in air, but also the temperature, the lower the temperature, the higher the relative humidity for the same amount of vapor. And so you get high relative humidity. Mold only grows where relative humidity goes above 85% for a long period of time. Condensation is when it hits 100%. Okay. So two things to know. One is that when it's cold outside, the dew point is really low because the vapor has come out of the air and either rained or it's come out of the air in one way or another. So when you ventilate a property and it's really cold outside, you get much better return on the amount of air extraction because the air that's coming into the property is really low dew point, and the air going out of the property is obviously higher dew point, so you're getting much better return. When it's raining, the dew point outside is really high, and the dew point will exactly match the outside temperature. So there comes a point where actually ventilation doesn't really help, and you're better to use something like a dehumidifier to reduce the vapor. This is largely to do with the modern ways of living, where we like to have a shower once or twice a day, where we like to cook in company and chat to each other, where we wash our clothes daily or every other day, where we have fresh clothes on, clean clothes on every day anyway. Yeah. And we don't use heating system, and we're worried about We don't have the heat on all day long. We just have it on when we're around. We turn the heat off in rooms that we're not occupying. Things like that, you know, they all contribute to mould and condensation.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to use the thermal imaging camera, and you'll see some interesting things with that.
Okay.
This is an example of overventilation. There's a kitchen extractor fan in the bathroom. Problem is it's too noisy, people won't use it, and even when it's used, 90% of the vapor remains in the bathroom once it's turned off. So people are likely to turn it off, leave the door open, leave the room, and majority of the vapor is still going to come into the house. Saying that you've got hygroscopic salts here. These are salts that draw in vapor, make it permanently damp, but it doesn't matter. You can't tell that here. I'll send you a link to hygroscopic salts. That's probably why somebody's taken the plaster off the wall. So in summary, in this property, there's mould. Mould at the base of the wall. Very simple thing to know is if there's mould at the base of the wall, you don't have rising damp. In fact, rising damp is exceptionally rare in the UK. It comes from groundwater. That's the water under the water table. It's not soil percolating through unsaturated soil. It's not rainwater percolating through unsaturated soil, because that will tend to be drawn down more than up. Gravity will overcome any capillary action, and capillary action is in both directions, up and down, as well as to the side. So where there's mold, there's no rising damp, and rising damp is exceptionally rare in the UK, and I'd argue in most countries, for it to be in contact with buildings, that is. So if it isn't rising damp and you've had damp proofing treatment, that increases the risk of mould and condensation. So that's number one. Number two is that if you've got mould, you've got excess vapor. Could be localized, local to a leak, or it could be general across the property. In most cases, it will be general across the property, and it will come from insufficient ventilation. You should use data loggers, hygrometers, or a mirror, as I discussed earlier, to determine whether the internal dew point is below the outside temperature. You don't need it to be lower than the outside temperature, because otherwise you're over ventilating. But in every property there will be somewhere that is close to the outside temperature, and that's when you'll get condensation and mold forming. In this case it was the corner, and in part it's because of the lack of airflow, air currents, but in every property you'll find some area where you've either got insulation and a gap behind it, or you've got a cupboard that's acting like insulation, or a sofa that's acting like insulation. It's very difficult. It's the primary cause of mold is excess vapor from insufficient ventilation, insufficient dehumidification, things like drying clothes internally, not using extractor fans as much as they should be. Have a look at the report and do make any comments. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.